Today we will be looking at Kibbutz Givat Chaim Ichud, which is a rich, well-established kibbutz in the center of Israel. We will see it through the eyes of a son of this kibbutz. His name is Amram Barr. He left the kibbutz when he was 22. That is more than 40 years ago. And he hadn't been a member there as far as I know. He left the kibbutz just after his military service. Amram wrote to me in February 2023. Since then, we have exchanged a number of emails. He said that his views of the kibbutz following the reformation and the Day of Reckoning should be entered into the history books as part of the kibbutz experience. Amram is the second generation of his kibbutz. His father, Yonah Landsberg, who died in 1986, had been a pioneer member of the kibbutz. Yonah had received reparations from Germany for the loss of his family, property, assets, and a lot more during the Holocaust. He had given all of his money, like other Holocaust survivors, to the kibbutz. At the end of the 1990s, following the financial collapse or near collapse of many kibbutzim, Givat Chaim Ichud started discussions about trying to solve the situation. As I mentioned in the last episode, number 15, change hurts. This reformation included two parts: differential salaries and privatization of public assets, including one's own home. If you haven't seen episode 15, I strongly advise you to see it first before viewing this episode, as it gives the backdrop to what I am about to show here in this episode. Round about the year 2004, Kibbutz Givat Chaim Ichud decided who should benefit from the privatization of homes and other assets. This was called the Day of Reckoning, in Hebrew, Yom HaKoveh. Every reformed kibbutz underwent this process, and each kibbutz established a date for the Day of Reckoning. After that date, there were those who were entitled to distribution and ownership of property and assets, and before that date, there were those who were not entitled. I present here Amram's story. I present it in his very own words. I read the script he sent me. He gives his opinion about the privatization process and the Day of Reckoning. It is his opinion, not mine. Maybe I will express an opinion at the end of this episode. We'll see, but I will try to hold back from my opinion and let you form your own opinion and understand how hard it was on many, many issues with many, many facets, how hard it was to make this decision about the process, the distribution, and the date for the Day of Reckoning. So here it is. And on the left is Givat Chaim Ichud. The kibbutz movement was essential to the formation of the State of Israel and to the development of its character. Established during the pioneer period, the kibbutz movement ideology was based on strongly held beliefs, including the Jews needed a state of their own and the Jewish state must be a just society. Many early pioneers, and specifically those who founded the kibbutz movement, aspired to build a utopian society where everyone would be equal and where the means of production were jointly owned by the community members. The founders of the kibbutz shared a commitment to fulfill the collective vision. Every member was expected to give fully of themselves for the good of the collective and of the country. All property, including inheritance, gifts, and income from outside sources, was turned over to the community and dispersed based on the maxim, to each according to their need and from each according to their ability. The principle of equality and the dictate against privately held property was taken extremely seriously. Kibbutz members did not individually own tools or even initially clothing. Members ate meals together in the communal dining hall. Everything a member needed was provided to them in the form of housing, food, medical care, and cultural activities. Children were raised collectively in children's homes, spending a few hours in the evenings and on the Shabbat with their parents. The children were considered children of the kibbutz, and their needs were provided by the community. The children were provided with education, were encouraged to participate in sports, and were required to work in the children's farm in addition to being expected to participate in social and cultural activities. The children of the kibbutz were indoctrinated with its core values of loyalty to Israel, hard work, collectivism, equality, and non-materialist values. The kibbutz members built thriving and prosperous communities supported by agriculture and industry. Early on, members of the kibbutz lived in true communal fashion. Their motto, as I said, was from each according to their need and from each according to their ability. As the kibbutz became more prosperous and dedication to hard work and idealism diminished, many second and third generation children of the kibbutz and those who joined during the prosperous years no longer wanted to live a communal lifestyle. Over the years, prohibitions against private ownership of material goods diminished, and the allowances paid to individual members for clothing, furniture, travel, and other needs grew from bare necessities to reflect the prosperity of the community. Eventually, the shift to more material goods led kibbutz members to reason the equality of distribution of goods and demanded differential rewards for differential contributions. Other kibbutz members decided that once the community provided different levels of rewards, it no longer met the definition of a kibbutz and demanded simply that the kibbutz be disbanded. My parents chose to disband and transfer assets belonging to the kibbutz in its capacity as a cooperative community to private ownership of individual kibbutz members. Assets included the homes where the members lived and common stock shares in the manufacturing assets of the kibbutz. This change allowed the members of the kibbutz full personal ownership of the assets allocated to them, and they were allowed to sell or bequeath these now personal properties. This is a gross injustice to members of the kibbutz, who, like my parents, long-term members of the collective, and who dedicated their working lives to the well-being of the kibbutz as a collective. They had contributed many years of their labor, all their inheritance, and in my father's case, substantial war reparations to the collective as a collective living by the ideals of their youth. These long-term members who had died before the day of dissolution and distribution of assets received nothing, and their heirs received less than nothing. My parents were proud members of the kibbutz from before the establishment of the state until their deaths. They believed in the ideology of the kibbutz and the value of the collective community. My parents and my father in particular contributed his lifelong labor to build the wealth of the kibbutz, but also turned over the millions of dollars in reparations he received from Germany, monies given to him to compensate him for the loss of his multi-generational wealth, which was stolen by the Nazis when they murdered his parents. This capital, in part, was used to build the kibbutz's largest asset, the Gat factory. Gat was recently sold to Coca-Cola for a large sum of money. My father died before the arbitrary date when the collective was privatized. It was only after my father's death that the then members of the collective he built voted to deconstruct and divide the fruit of his labor and generational wealth to themselves as individuals. The collective assets, including the Gat factory, were distributed to those individuals who chose to deconstruct what my parents had built as their legacy, what they believed in, what they worked for and contributed to, and took as their own unearned windfall. The deconstruction of the kibbutz stole not only the generational wealth for the second time, it also destroyed the legacy my parents left and unjustly enriched the architects of its demise. This is a travesty. Those living in the kibbutz on the day of distribution received shares they can give to their children. I received nothing. My children will receive nothing. Those who divided the kibbutz assets among themselves will get a larger portion of the wealth by excluding me and others from what would be normal and expected in any society around the world. This sort of an injustice only happened in communist totalitarian regimes. This is not a good company to be associated with, especially considering that it has been done by Israeli Jews to their brothers and sisters in a supposed democratic country 2 generations following the Holocaust. Well, there it is. What do you think? Was there a degree of unfairness in the distribution and monetization of assets? We're talking here not just about Givat Chaim Ichud, but we are talking about this as a question to each and every one of the 200 kibbutzim that underwent this process of privatization of their homes. But just remember that this wasn't an overnight process. There were many years of discussion in each kibbutz before a vote was taken. There were many aspects of this process. One of them was seniority of members in the kibbutz. In other words, the number of years that they had been members, and according to the number of years, each year was taken into account for an accumulation of, let's call it, points towards this privatization process. Inheritance rights were also taken into account, but what we are looking at here is Amram's case as someone who had left the kibbutz many years before the process was even initiated or even thought about. From what I understand, he left the kibbutz 44 years ago. But he is making a case for multi-generational wealth and inheritance based on what his father gave freely to the kibbutz from his reparations. Do you think that some of that wealth that enriched the kibbutz should have been bequeathed to Amram? What do you think? Givat Chaim Ichud is just one example of many that had members who had received Holocaust reparations. There are thousands of other cases in other kibbutzim whereby these people gave freely of their own volition to help the kibbutz during early pioneer times and even later. I want to hear from you in the comments below. In particular, I want to hear from Givat Chaim Ichud. I would really appreciate it if the kibbutz would invite me to record the response live on a video so that I give them a platform for saying how and why they came to this process and the day of reckoning. Well, there you are. It's up to you. I'm waiting to hear from you. In the meantime, keep well, all the best, and in a moment I will tell you about the next episode, which may be a response from Givat Chaim Ichud or from other kibbutzim who can write to me as well. And if I don't receive the response within, let's say, a week, then I will put up another video about another subject until I receive 1, 2, 3 or many responses, either as comments in this video below or whenever. So in the meantime, keep well, look after yourselves, enjoy life, shalom, and later on.